Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome everybody to Hands-On Apologetics. I'm Gary Michuta, and it's great to be with you with another week of high-intensity talk Catholic apologetics. You have entered into the Virgin Most Powerful Apologetics Dojo, and we got a very interesting show in store for you today. Coming back into the dojo, we're going to have our guest, Paul Thomas, come, and we're going to talk about the scandal of the divisions within Protestantism. Many of you are already familiar with Paul. He's been on the show a few times, and he gave a remarkable story of his own reversion back to the church. And if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend you jump on the Virgin Most Powerful radio.org website and look it up, because it's a fantastic story. And one of the elements of him coming back in the church was his realization of the fragmentation within Protestantism. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Should be a lot of fun, as always, with Paul. Also, we have our Finding the Fallacy. Finding the Fallacy today is the slippery slope argument. And also, we're going to meet an early church father. Today's early church father is Peter of Alexandria. So loads of fun in store for us today. And as always, you are part of the program, so especially on the other side of the break when we bring Paul Thomas on, give us a call at 888-526-2151. That's 888-526-2151. Love to hear from you. And also you can send us your emails at questions@handsonapologetics.com. Questions@handsonapologetics.com. That's all one word. And that is the direct line to the dojo mailbox, wherein I read and answer every email that comes in. And even sometimes we mention it on the air. And if it's really, really good, sometimes we devote a whole program to unpacking some of your emails. So your emails are very valuable. Please shoot us an email at questions@handsonapologetics.com. I'd love to hear from you. And it's time for our shout-outs to those watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. It's great to see some familiar names and some new names there on the YouTube forum. Great to have you on board as we discuss how to explain and defend the Catholic faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. Before we do the Finding the Fallacy, I want to mention this. This is an apologetics show, and so I assume that if you're listening to this show that you are interested in the roots of Catholicism. What are the biblical, rational, historical, logical reasons for being Catholic? And many times that involves Scripture. And I just want to mention this because one tool I use virtually every day as an apologist is an electronic tool that you can get called Logos. There's also a Catholic version called Verbum. And it's at logos.com. And the only reason I mention this is because it's such a handy tool. It's a Bible program. And so you can, there's packages you can buy, and you can get different kinds of English translations of Scripture. There's automatic searches. There's even beyond that, you can get Bible commentaries, Catholic commentaries that will link to those verses. So just by bringing up, let's say, John 3:16, not only will the program bring that up to you in any translation that you have, but it'll also flip to the area of the commentary. So you can do multiple commentary searches in seconds on this program. And it's constantly expanding with not just Bible text, but it also has their early church father writings. It has historical documents. It has other languages, like if you read Greek, you get the Septuagint, Greek New Testament, or Hebrew, you can get the Masoretic text. And in fact, I am fired up about a new add-on. So this is I guess we should have a nerd alert. Richie will have to work on that. Maybe we can have it flash on the screen, nerd alert, because I'm sure there's maybe one person out there watching the program that this will interest. But you should know about it. There is a giant collection of the early church fathers in their original language called the Ming. The title is the Patrologia Latina et Graece. Okay, so the early church fathers, Greek, Latin. This is in every seminary of any note. So if you ever go to seminary, you go to the seminary library, you'll see it's like 200 volumes of all the early church fathers, all the way up to the medieval period in Greek and Latin. And it's it's been superseded by some other critical works. But as far as the entire scope of the work, it's amazing. Well, anyway, Logos this June is going to release the first 10 volumes of that in electronic form. So I am fired up because this means that you can not only do searches within the New Testament text in Greek, but you can also see where the same words and phrases are used in the Greek fathers up to the time of origin. So okay, the nerd alert's over. You guys can now tune back to the program. But anyway, I want to recommend that. By the way, they don't pay me any money. I've been using it for years. In fact, I got my Logos back when it was in the beta version on 3.5 floppies. Do you remember those? Way back in the olden days. And it's a great program. It's really evolved over the years. And as an apologist, like I said, daily jump on it. So just FYI. Okay, so let's jump to our finding the fallacy. Like I said, the fallacy for today is the slippery slope argument. And basically, you can guess what this is. The fallacious use of the slippery slope is when someone asserts that a relatively small first step leads to a chain of related events culminating in a significant, usually negative effect. In fact, there's a commercial out there somewhere. I don't remember what the brand name was, but they basically say if you don't get cable or something, this will happen, and then that will happen. Then before you know it, the world blows up. So it advises to get this particular cable package. That's kind of slippery slope argument. It's when you basically narrow down all your choices to one or two choices or consequences, and ultimately the end is something absurd. Now, the slippery slope can be used as a fallacy, but I think it mirrors a real argument where you can draw certain conclusions will follow from certain premises. So beware, not every slippery slope argument is a fallacy, although if you jump from one step to another where there could be multiple other consequences, that would be the fallacy. So that's our fallacy for today, the slippery slope argument. Meet the early church fathers. Let's jump to our early church father for today, who is Peter of Alexandria. He died sometime around AD 311. It's generally assumed that Peter, although he was not an anti-Origenist, in other words, he didn't oppose the teachings, the heretical teachings of Origen, was the head of a catechetical school in Alexandria prior to being made bishop of that see, roughly around the year AD 300. After being bishop of Alexandria for about 11 years, he died a martyr's death. Now, except for a very short letter to the clergy of Alexandria in reference to a person who tried to usurp the see, we really don't have a lot of writings from him. In fact, most of the writings that we have from Peter of Alexandria are in small fragments. So not a lot of biographical data on Peter of Alexandria. Just that he was the head of the catechetical school. He wasn't opposed necessarily to Origen's, some of his strange teachings, and he died a martyr's death. But we do have fragments, and one of those fragments is on penance, or it's also sometimes known as the canonical letter. This was written in around 306 AD. And like I said, it's preserved only in little fragments. But there is one thing. It has 15 canons, And one of the canons that is mentioned in this letter is very interesting from Peter of Alexandria. And so let me read that for you, since we have a couple, about a minute before the break. We could do it. Peter, the first chosen of the apostles, having been apprehended, often and thrown into prison and treated with ignominy, was crucified in Rome. And the renowned Paul, oftentimes having delivered up and put in peril of death, having endured many evils, boasting of his numerous persecutions and afflictions, was even himself put to the sword and beheaded in the city of Rome. And that is Canon 9 from Peter of Alexandria's fragments of his canonical letter, or letter on penance. Now, of course, what's important here is this is an extremely early witness about Peter dying in Rome. And in fact, he mentions that the way Peter died was through crucifixion. Also, by the way, where and how Paul was also martyred, that he was put to the sword and beheaded in Rome as well. And of course, this is very important because, after all, the foundation of the papacy is centered on that Peter was Bishop of Rome when he died, roughly around AD 67, 68. And we also know that he was crucified upside down, and that at his death, his office was filled. Another took his office, and that person who took the office is Saint Linus. So very important testimony from Peter of Alexandria. And like I said, not of a kind of obscure early church father, but nevertheless, he is part of that glorious assembly of ancient writings. Coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to talk with Master Apologist Paul Thomas about Protestantism and the scandal of division. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. You know, there's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites The Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. 2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back to Hands On Apologetics. Well, we have coming on as guest a fellow that you're familiar with. He is our Eastern Rite Catholic apologist, Paul Thomas. Paul Thomas has done numerous talks. He himself is a revert to the Catholic faith. He's done numerous talks for Catholic audiences and youth groups, adults, men's groups. He's one of the most dynamic speakers I know. And what I love about Paul is his take from an Eastern Rite view of the faith and also of apologetics in general. And if you want to catch his whole entire story, just go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org website and select Hands On Apologetics on our shows and go all the way back to November of 2018, not 19, November 28th of last year, and Paul gave his story. And Paul Thomas, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
My man, Gary.
Hey, Paul.
Wow,
I can't believe it has been that long since you first came on the show.
I know. Time, the hour flies by, but time in general flies by. It's crazy.
I know. Yeah, November 28th last year. I'm sure the people who listen regularly are familiar with your story, but would you mind maybe giving us a little thumbnail sketch about, how you grew up Catholic, how you came back to the Catholic Church?
I've done this 5,000 times.
Okay.
It's weird. The older you get, and when you look back on things you missed, you see that led you back. And I think the way that I left so far is why I came back so hard. I got lucky that I had a father that took the faith very seriously, and it never ever faltered. No matter all the heresy I believed and all the crazy stuff that I dabbled in, and he was always kind of my rock to go back to. Because my father is a very wise and smart man, so I sort of always knew I would kind of end there. So I just became a really good criminal at a young age, a very successful criminal. And it was, nothing violent or anything. I was a drug dealer and growing weed and, stuff like that in my late teens and early 20s. And just, I don't know, man. I just left. I wanted to study every other faith. I couldn't just believe the one thing that I was told was true. So I had to discover, and I left, and I went around, and I studied every religion out there, every crazy philosophy. And I think once I wanted to lower the veil from my eyes, because one thing when you accept the Catholic faith, if you're outside of it, you always see everything as no. You can't do this. It's almost like the St. Augustine quote, "Oh, Lord, save me, just not now."
Right.
So sometimes you don't want to find it because you know the repercussions of accepting something. Well, you have to accept the whole thing. I'm just a hard-minded person like that. If I'm diving in, I'm diving in. I'm not just going to be ho-hum with it. I can't do that. It's not part of my nature.
Right.
So I sort of softened myself and honestly investigated. And, I had to come to terms with a lot of things that I've done and what I believe. And the second I lowered it's like we talked about the Eucharist on that talk. Once you accept it with faith and ask God to actually show you, man, did he show me. Like within 24 hours, I went from semi-wealthy drug dealer to nothing. In 24 hours of my first prayer that I said over 15 years, he answered me in 24 hours. And all of a sudden I found myself in a jail cell with everything taken away from me. And I was so happy. And that was my exodus. My exodus back into the promised land. And then from there, you kind of just, it's too long. You just have to go back and listen.
Yeah, right.
Hands on apologetics with Gary Matuda.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted you to kind of give a synopsis, not only because it's been a while since you've given it, and there are new listeners, so I wanted them to be familiar with your story. And by the way, his journey back into the faith is truly amazing. You got to check out that November
Correct.
28th broadcast. But it also kind of dovetails with our topic today, which is the scandal of divisions within Protestantism.
Oh boy. That is the one thing. Once I got into accepting Christianity, that was the one thing that really drove me towards the church.
Yeah.
Was I went to every different church. I mean, you know my story. I probably went to, I'm not exaggerating, maybe 50 different. I mean, there's some streets where I live. There's 9 different churches in a half mile on a road.
Yep.
And you're talking, you're 30 or 40 different kind of Methodists. I went Lutheran, Anglican, different kind of Baptist. And I can never get a straight answer. And the only answer I could get is the other guy is misusing scripture. And what I'm telling you is true. That doesn't sit well with me. I think the analogy I came up with is I can't throw a 2,000-sided die and roll it, and then whatever it lands on, I'm going to put my heart in. That's just, I'm not a gambling man. And that just seemed like a gamble to me. And it almost drove me away from Christianity. I'm like, this is schizophrenic, this faith. Everyone believes something different, yet everyone else is wrong and they're right. Yeah. And that was about 6 months of my journey where it, I don't want to use the word confused. It didn't deter me, but it confused me even more than when I was initially searching.
Right.
So it was like a 6-month stumbling block. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Now, coming from your perspective, you're Lebanese, you're Maronite Rite Catholic, and I know from Eastern Rite Catholics, especially those who are recent immigrants or their families just immigrated, in Lebanon or wherever, it's not, you don't run into Protestantism there. If you do, it's a very small kind of sect. It's either Muslim, Catholic, or Orthodox, right?
Yeah, and being in the East, and I know saying this is not popular in the Latin Rite or even Western Christendom, but when they come to our, to the Middle East, where our, my community is 2,000 years old. We've been Christian since the beginning of Christianity. My uncle back home always said, our house that we live in is older than the Reformation. So we have our communities, and that's our strength, is our unity.
Yeah.
But like our family back home doesn't even consider Protestantism Christian.
Okay.
Where that's not popular to say, but we just don't. It's
sure.
Actually, when they build their churches around our villages, and I mean I'm not part of it, but they burn them down.
Wow.
They go to pagan lands and proselytize. Don't come to ancient Christian civilization and split us up. We're barely staying alive as it is, and now you want to split us up so we argue with each other? I mean, it's a different mindset because people in the West are not surrounded by enemies. And, we die for our faith. You say the sign of the cross in the wrong spot, you lose your arm.
Right.
So it's just a different, Christian unity is a different thing to us in the East than it is in the West. Although it seems the way the ethos is going in the West, it could be happening here in a decade.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is I used to work with Chaldean Catholics, and you too as well. And I know the experience that they have when they come to America is they are kind of, they're not really sure what to make, of Protestantism, because they see them as Christians, but there's such a diversity of opinion that I know a lot of Catholics that are just recently, emigrate to America, they get confused, right? They
my uncle, I told you the story. My uncle came from Lebanon maybe 10 years ago. And we're driving around. He goes to have some family in Canada, but he came here to visit. He goes, who's St. Luther? Who's St. Baptist? I never heard of these saints before. So I'm trying to explain to him what it is, and he just could not understand it.
Right.
It was something very foreign to him.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
very foreign.
So, so when you were out, you just came out of a life of crime. You're trying to search for truth, for faith, I guess. So, how did you deal with that when you went to the first Protestant church, where you're just saying, what do you believe? What does the Bible teach? And it didn't settle right, or were you confused because there were other people that had different opinions?
Well, this is what's funny, and you know me pretty well. I'm not one to pull punches. I'm not one to talk behind your back. I say it to your face. I'm pretty vocal and loud, and I'm not scared to debate.
Yeah.
So I'd go with an earnest, open heart. I would go participate in their service. And I remember the first one I went to was a Lutheran church with a friend I actually brought into the church too, at the same time as me. So we would go, and remember, I was raised Catholic, and it would always end, and I'd be like, something's missing. Like there's no Eucharist or communion. I didn't understand that was a Catholic Orthodox thing. Our whole worship is based around the Eucharist. Everything is based around it. It's the source and summit of our faith. And even though I was really poorly catechized, not by my parents, but just I didn't have a strong grasp of why we do what we do. I just knew what we did. So when I would question, I remember questioning a Baptist about the Eucharist, man, he was actually angry that I brought it up. And I never seen Catholics as like evil. I knew we didn't worship statues. I know we didn't worship Mary. I knew these things just because I was raised in it.
Right.
So I think after like the 40th one, I went to like hardcore Black Baptist churches, the singing and everything. I went everywhere. And instead of leading me up, it kind of led me into almost a form of deconstructionism, if that makes sense. Everyone uses these same verses, but they're arguing with each other over this verse and what it means. And I didn't know where to land. Now, I know you're a humble man, but what really started getting me to think was your book, was Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger. And I remember reading that, and it's our same friend, our Chaldean friend.
Yeah.
He gave me the book because he knew you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was your book, kind of about the 7 books.
Yeah.
And it started turning my head towards accepting maybe, I got to investigate this church too. It has the most history, but we'll talk about it after the break. It's a daunting subject.
Okay. We're talking with Master Apologist Paul Thomas about scandal and divisions within Protestantism. So stay tuned, everybody. More to come after the break.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Master Apologist Paul Thomas, our Maronite Rite Catholic apologist, on the divisions and the scandal of divisions in Protestantism. And, you know, Paul, that last point you made was really interesting, because not only do you have Protestant denominations appealing to the same verse but having different interpretations of that verse, but you also have phenomena like megachurches where they say basically, you know, doctrine doesn't matter. What matters is believing in Jesus. And issues like the canon really does cut to the center of that kind of perspective, doesn't it?
I mean, you can't go into the history of, you know, which text that we use, and you go into Masoretic text and Septuagint and what those 7 books contain. But I think it's even crazier than that. When you brought up megachurch, the last one I went to, I can't, like, you're reading my mind.
Well, that's part of being the host.
Megachurch. Psychic Lincoln.
That's right.
I had to check one out. I'm like, man, there's 700-800 people going there. Let me check it out. So I walk in. It's in this giant place that used to be like a Home Depot or something. It is huge. I walk in. There's an arcade. There's a coffee shop. There's this stuff. And I walk in, and, man, they had performers there that could be like in Hollywood. I mean, but they were doing like rap and rock and roll. And, I mean, it was a heck of a performance. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's, you know, the Catholic part ingrained in me as I was growing up, but it just, when it ended, I kind of looked around like, that's it? It just didn't feel like worship. And again, it kind of went to your, not even your thesis, your conclusion that, you know, it's just all about believing in Jesus.
Yeah.
But I think my hard-minded philosophical mind said, which Jesus?
Yes.
Your Jesus?
Yes.
Or his? Or the Anglican Jesus? Or maybe it's the, you know, the Lutheran Jesus, or is it the Baptist Jesus that you know you're not allowed to dance or drink alcohol. So these are big deals. And again, I got one chance. I got one life. And I'll tell you, the one thing that really led me to accept diving back into Catholicism is seeing human artifices, things that we built, and how long did these communities last before they split? You know, a lot of these divisions last 2 or 3 generations, they split into something else.
Yeah.
If the Catholic Church really wasn't founded by Jesus, do you really think a bunch of sinning men full of debauchery, you look at our history, we should have destroyed the church 50 times over, and it's still here.
Yeah.
How is it still here? I mean, how many people tried to destroy it? I forgot which pope said that. I think it was when Napoleon said that he would destroy the church. And was it Pope Leo? I think said, "Good luck. We've been trying to destroy it for how many years, and we can't even destroy it on the inside. You're not going to destroy it from the outside." It's an amazing reality in history of the one thing that us humans are part of that still lasts today. And we don't have an army and a government, and we're just a holy institution that still is the biggest charitable organization in the world. who the world owes the education system to, the scientific method. I mean, Western law and human rights come from the church. And when you start delving into the history of it, which is deeper than the greatest abyss in the ocean, our history,
right.
It's a lifelong journey, and it's something that's very fulfilling. And, you know, once it's tried, it is very simple as just believe in Jesus. But believing comes with, it's more of a marriage. It's not just believing in some guy.
Yeah. You know, you brought up a really good point because especially here in America, we're used to the latest version. You know, version 2.0 is always better than version 1.1. Or also, you know, if you don't find a church that suits your needs, you can go and church shop. I mean, that's actually a word out there that people will shop around to find a church that kind of suits them, and that's where they go. And but from your perspective, I mean, from an Eastern Rite perspective, I mean, your whole psyche is rooted in history. You know, you're in touch with your past, and that's two very different worldviews, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, even for Eastern Rite in America, it's slightly different because we grew up. You know, I was born here. My family came here in the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in this country. So our religious ethos, if you want to call it, like you said, there's always another translation. There's always a translation of a translation that's even better and easier to understand. But I thank my father for taking me back to see where we came from. You know, we live in these ancient buildings. We walk down these ancient streets that Jesus walked on. You know, every day we touch buildings that go back before Jesus. So our history is not something that we read about in books. It's something that we live in every day. So it's hard to disconnect us from our history when our history is something that we live in every day. That's not lost. It's not some old fable. It's my neighbor's house. You know, right. It's like even, you know, for my family, you know, we converted in the first century. It's almost like a family tradition to us. You know, we were Christian before the scriptures were put together.
Yeah.
This is, that's another thing that kind of bothered me.
Right.
If scripture is our true authority, and how we think of Catholics is the Bible is authoritative, but an authority is one who interprets something that's authoritative. The Bible doesn't speak. So if it is our true rule of faith, only the Bible and the way you interpret it, then the church really didn't exist for 500 years. Because when Jesus left on Pentecost, there was... My dad just showed up and was waving to me. I'm sorry. It's, who was the church the day of Pentecost? Like, was that authoritative church here and able to teach and able to do things? Or did it have to wait? Because even when the scriptures were written, most churches did not have all of them. They had some of them. Like, you know, the Pauline churches had the letters he wrote to them. And then maybe the couple Gospels. But they didn't have what we have today put in a binding with 27 books.
Right.
That is a further 4 centuries later.
Right.
So when I started reading, another verse that really got me is when Jesus says, so as the Father has sent me, and I send you. And then he tells them whatever sins you forgive are forgiven, and whatever sins you bind are bound. Like, man could bind people's sins? This is power that is given, that's outside of Scripture, that was given to the apostles. That really intrigued me. Like, so he gave them this power, then where is it today? Because he said the church will always be here, and this is what he set up. Right. Where are these people that can forgive my sins on earth and in heaven? This one verse that intrigued me right there was my, like, I don't know. It was my foot in the door, and I got to see behind the door, and it was really attractive, but it also scared the crap out of me. Because I knew the implications of flirting with this. Mm-hmm. Because I knew if I went in, I had to go totally in, and I knew there would be some repercussions on my lifestyle.
Right.
But my lifestyle I knew was kind of shallow, and I really wasn't satisfied. So I started flirting with it, you know what happens when you start digging into history.
Yeah, it could be a dangerous thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it can.
Well, hey,
But you know what? I got burned, and it was awesome.
Yeah, thanks be to God. Well, we have a call from John.
Thanks be to God.
John, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
What's up, John?
Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Oh, yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, well, great. I got a question for Paul. I'm real interested in this thing. I'm older, and I don't know how old you are, but I have such a I just love apologetics. And
Good.
you were brought up Catholic, and you had a dad that was very Catholic. And then even when you came back towards the church, you still looked at Protestantism. So I guess my question is, did you ever get any apologetics when you were growing up at all? Yeah, that's my question.
Oh, man, my dad is like a scholar. My mom is like, I grew up, my dad's mom was like a saint. My mom is a saint. But my dad is a saint, but he is an apologist. But you know what?
Okay, so even when you were
a prophet, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Paul. Even when you were young, he wasn't teaching you, or did he teach you how to defend yourself against Protestantism?
Not so much about Protestantism, but just against the world. More the worldly, secular, atheist kind of stuff. But
okay.
I
had that kind of upbringing. I had that kind of upbringing too, but when someone walks up to you, and they say, "Call no man father," etc., all the arguments, of course.
Oh yeah.
I was never prepared for that kind of thing. I was pretty well catechized, but I was just really interested in your search after you decided to come back, having such a Catholic family, why you would even consider Protestantism.
Dude, amen. I don't know. There's when Jesus says a prophet never has respect in his own village. When you hear it from your parents, like family, it usually doesn't convert family. It's usually a stranger. Now, I was well catechized on what the church was and, the rubrics and the accoutrements and all that stuff. But I never really heard a lot of the hard, the James Whites and you have really good Protestant apologists, and they make some good points if you're really not well-versed in Catholic apologetics, Catholic apologetics are nothing new. You go back to Justin Martyr in the 1st century, 2nd century. Our apologetics are very old, but I wasn't really privy to these ancient arguments. So
yeah, very good.
I guess more on the other side.
We are talking to Master Apologist Paul Thomas. More on the other side of the break. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now are saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Master Apologist Paul Thomas. And by the way, John, by the way, I put you on mute, and I was going to have a follow-up question on the other side of break, but I guess we lost you. My apologies. So Paul, yeah, that's a really good, he brings up a very good point, is, many of us are catechized, but we aren't really educated in how to explain and defend the faith, are we?
No. I was going to say to him, if he was still on, I can completely guess he didn't listen to my story, because I'm a cornucopia of bad decisions. So that was just one of them. Add on the other 3,000, and then you'll realize why I did that.
You and me both. So that's why we get along. But it's got to be rooted in catechesis, because you can't come up with answers to every objection out there, because there are so many different beliefs, so many different denominations, so many different objections. So knowing your faith well is a good place to start. So when you were coming back to the church, you kind of had a firsthand experience about being pummeled with objections and so on.
Yes. But what's really weird is, even though I didn't consider myself Catholic, I still argued from that point, because that was the point I understood. So Everything else was just different than Catholicism. It was my base, because I was raised in it,
Yeah. Right.
Like you said, you learn the faith, but you don't learn why you believe this. Mm-hmm. And what really changed me was really I don't know the word. It was really the point that really opened my eyes, is going, well, I know what these people believe now. I know what the reformers believed originally, and a lot of these churches don't believe what they believe. What did the Christians in the first 5 centuries believe? Like outside of the Bible, these are, holy writ, but we have a lot of Christians in the first 5 century. What did they believe? And it led me to the patristic fathers, and that was my downfall. That was the opening the door and sliding down full speed.
Right.
And
and it was your background, because you're rooted in the past, right? That you could see that.
Mm-hmm.
But, what kind of advice would you give Catholics who are born here in the United States, right? Maybe there's parents out there listening that are raising kids, to kind of instill in them this idea of how ancient the faith is. And like you said, that miracle of perpetuity, that the church continues on, even despite all the scandals, all the corruption and so on.
I do understand. It can be depressing when you see all the stuff going on. And you start to think of the church, at least modern day, like a business. Like, that scandal, they're closed, they need to resign. This is nothing new. We've gone through way worse scandals than this.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
Again, get rooted in history and start reading about the Arian heresy. I mean, you got a heresy that swallowed 90% of the church, maybe even more. Yet we're still here. You have the 100 years of the Borgia popes. You got Pope Alexander. You got all kinds of scandal. we're still here. Nothing could survive that it wasn't a divine mandate. It just, you look at history, you got countries with armies, how many empires has Europe been? I mean, in the last 200 years, they've been the Hungarian Empire. They've been all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yet the church is still here. It's almost like living and seeing a miracle, but not realizing the miracle. You know me, I love analogies.
Yeah.
To me, it's why Jesus used parables. It's the same reason I like analogies, because you can understand them, and there's no such thing as a perfect analogy, but it helps shed light on what we walk in. I don't know if it was my father. I think it was. And there was always this painting I loved downstairs. It was like this boat out on the water and a light shining behind it. And it's gorgeous, but it's a painting. And I remember him telling me, you look at the painting and you see this art, but you don't see what they're painting as art. So you see the sun and you see the sky and you paint it and now it's art. But what you're painting, you don't realize you're walking in art all day.
Yeah. Right.
And it transcends you when you think about it like that. And I started seeing the church like that, with all its imperfections, all its humans, and everyone literally subconsciously trying to destroy it, yet it still stands strong. And it's amazing to be part of it. Something that is 2,000 years old. It's
yeah.
It's amazing. It's a piece of art.
You did put that very well. It is like a miracle that everybody has access to. It's happening right now, but you can't recognize it unless you know the history.
Yep.
That's fascinating. And
then
you know,
as
especially...
a person,
go ahead.
As a person growing up Catholic, it's like people, okay, you know when have you ever been to Hawaii?
I haven't, no.
Okay, I haven't either. But when you look at it, everyone's like, oh, what a heaven. I want to go there. It's so beautiful. But the people that live there don't see it like that because they live in it every day.
Yeah.
It's just another scene that I drive through, whoopie-doo-dah. They look at where we live as something awesome. So when you grow up in it, I think you see the miraculous as somehow mundane because it's common and you don't see it because you're sort of blinded to the beauty because you live in it and you take it for granted. You really do.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so glad I left and I came back. Because I'm kind of like the prodigal son. And what did the father do to the prodigal son? He slaughtered the fattest calf. So it's almost like he welcomes you back and you get this giant party. And it's just, it's liberating. It really is. If that's the word I can use, it most appropriately describes it. I was lost, but now I'm home. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're so accustomed in America with this, these got you moments, especially in politics. Somebody makes a slip up or a photograph, that that looks ridiculous or something like that, and people just say, well, that's the end of their career, And I think
you know it happens like that in Protestantism, though. I mean, you have churches now that 10 years ago never accepted homosexuality and homosexual marriage, and the LGBTQ, whatever the end is now, all that agenda. And within 10 years, you got half the churches accepted now.
Yeah.
Another thing I love about being part of the church, you can hate it, but it ain't changing. And that's a boat I can anchor to.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, I want to switch gears really quick because there's another aspect of this division thing that we haven't touched on. And I'm going to read, this is from John 17, verses 20 and 21. It's Jesus' high priestly prayer. And he says, I'm not asking on behalf of them alone, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word, that all will be one, as you, Father, are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. And there was something that you touched on earlier when you were going to these different churches that you realized that what is this Christianity? Because it seems like it's talking on both sides of its mouth. It's for one thing, and then you go to another church that's against it, and vice versa.
Another analogy. Go figure.
Okay.
I always seen it after I left and I was able to look at the outside because that almost drove me away. I almost was like, if the Bible is a choose-your-own-adventure book, it's not true. That's where my thesis landed before I decided to look into Catholicism. But it's like scriptural inflation. $1 million right now is a lot of money. If I had $1 million, it'd be awesome. But if everyone had $1 million, well, it'd be worthless, because then $1 million becomes $1. So if there's 1 million interpretations of the Bible, then there is no interpretation. It means nothing. It's worthless. It's whatever you want it to be. That doesn't breed unity. To me, I almost think Protestantism is the reason. I mean, look where its origins are, Western Europe. Do you see Christianity in Western Europe? The places where it was born, Christianity has died. Because to me, I think it confused people to what Christianity really is. Because if it is that, then it's everything. You know, Jesus is what? Yeah. Whatever you want him to be. That I cannot accept. And I think the world, the pagan world on the outside sees that too. This is why I think we converted so many people instantly, because we were one.
Yeah.
And once you destroy how do you destroy? I mean, you scatter the family, kill the shepherd, scatter the flock. And that is kind of what has happened. Look at the flock. It's easily divided when there is no standard for truth that can't change.
Right. And if our interpretation of Scripture is based on our own subjective, tenets and stuff, who's to say that the authors of Scripture themselves weren't just picking and choosing, and that's just their opinion, but there could have been others' opinion about who or what Jesus is. You know what I mean? It kind of undermines the integrity of the Scripture itself.
Well, of course. I mean, even in my year of reading, when I was studying my way in, certain verses became different to me, and I interpreted them different as the more that I learned. So one verse that I could have put my code on all of a sudden means something different because I learned something else. So truth does not evolve. It's true. You might evolve, but the truth cannot change according to your own will. This is
very good.
Just not something I can accept.
Yeah. Well, hey, Paul, I can't believe our hour is just flowing.
Come on, it's already over?
It's already over. I know. Time flies when you're having fun. But thanks so much for coming on Hands On Apologetics. We appreciate it.
No, not as much as me. I love you, my brother. Thank you.
All right. Well, take care. That is Paul Thomas, Master Apologist, Eastern Rite, Dojo Specialist. And the time, I tell you, the time just flies. And we have a bunch of great guests coming up this week. We have Catholic Brian coming back into the dojo. He's going to talk about 10 do's and don'ts about evangelism. We also have a person that this is going to be my first acquaintance with, Anthony Digman. Mark McNeil is coming back to the dojo, convert, and we're going to talk about prayer in apologetics. And then Friday, we're going to have Teresa Beam come on and talk about Seventh-day Adventists. So lots of interesting things on the docket this week, I tell you. But like I said, it's amazing, but it's already time to shut down the Midwest Command Center here and turn off the lights at the dojo. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed the program. And coming up next, we have high-intensity Catholic talk coming at you with a dynamic duo of Catholicism, the Terry and Jesse Show, the show that started it all, folks, Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I'm Gary Machuda, and I hope everybody has a wonderful, blessed day. And God willing, we'll get together and talk tomorrow. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.